is SMNI News Channel. Truth that matters.
Good evening, Philippines, and good day, world. I'm Angel Pastor. It's Wednesday, the 12th of July, 2023, and you're watching Newsline World. We're here to bring you the top stories we've gathered from all over the globe. As the second day of the NATO summit kicks off in Vilnius, Lithuania, a day member leaders of the alliance failed to provide a clear timeline on Ukraine's accession. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy slammed NATO for failing to provide a timeline, saying that Kiev deserves respect and that uncertainty is a weakness. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warns of the risk of U.S. recession, saying that it is still not off the table. America's Vermont is under a state of emergency due to heavy rains and flooding that engulfed the area. And Thailand's Prime Minister and strongman Prayut announced that he will quit politics for good. These and more for tonight's edition of Newsline World. First in our news, the MMDA is appealing to motorcycle riders not to stop or gather under bridges and footbridges when it rains, because it will not only cause heavy traffic but may also cause accidents. The MMDA sees a way to help riders every time it rains. Jason Rubrico has the news.
The MMDA CCTV camera captured these motorcycle riders in the middle of the street this Tuesday afternoon. They took shelter at the Ortigas flyover due to heavy rain while occupying one lane of the road. And just a few minutes after, the traffic was gradually getting heavier from Guadix Drive to the Guadalupe Bridge. In other CCTV footage from the MMDA, some ride-hailing riders also gathered under a flyover in Edsa Monte and occupied a lane. The MMDA's Facebook post about this garnered various reactions from netizens. There are those who say that when motorcycle riders are honked at, they are still angry, while others say that no one dies in the rain, but many die in accidents. So the MMDA has repeatedly pleaded with motorcycle riders that when it rains, avoid gathering under bridges and footbridges. MMDA Acting Chairman Attorney Romando Artes explained that it can not only cause traffic, but it can also cause an accident.
Delikado rin po para sa kanila. Imagine niyo nasa highway ka, titigil ka doon, pwede kang masagasaan or mabangga pag hindi ka napansin ng ibang nagmamaneho ng sasakyan.
According to Artes, there are laybys located under the flyovers where motorists can take shelter when it rains. Apart from this, the MMDA also sees other solutions to somehow help motorcycle riders.
Gusto kasi namin holistic yung approach regarding that. Kaya inaaral po natin, kasama nga po yung pagdadagdag ng lay-by at ganon din po yung paglalagay po ng silungan sa mga gas stations po along EDSA.
According to the MMDA, vehicles blocking and stopping in the middle of the road may result in a fine of 500 pesos.
Soon, pag naiayos po natin yung ating sistema, particularly yung sa mga gasoline stations, I think we'll strictly enforce na po yung pag-i-issue ng ticket sa mga magbabiolate.
For God and my beloved Philippines, I am Jason Rubrico, SMNI News.
Meanwhile, Vermont is facing a devastating flood. Heavy rainfall has caused widespread destruction, leaving residents stranded in the city in a state of emergency. Here's more from Sigrid Castañeda.
Montpelier, the state capital of Vermont, is in a state of emergency due to severe flooding caused by heavy rainfall. The situation is described as catastrophic, with roadways impassable and residents stranded in their homes. Governor Phil Scott has declared the flooding in Vermont as historic and catastrophic. The downtown area of Montpelier is severely affected, with streets submerged in floodwaters reaching the windows of businesses and vehicles. The Wrightsville Dam near the city is at maximum capacity, posing a threat of further flooding if it spills over. Climate scientists link these extreme weather events to human-driven climate change. Other regions in the United States are experiencing soaring temperatures, such as scorching heat in Florida and Texas and extreme desert temperatures in California. Efforts to rescue stranded residents are underway, with search teams using swift boats to evacuate people from their homes and cars. Highway closures have made evacuations challenging, leaving residents urged to seek safety on higher floors. The flood brought a huge economic impact, with damages and losses estimated to reach between $3 billion and $5 billion. Reporting this has been Sigrid Castaneda, SMNI News.
The president of Iran will pursue his scheduled trip to Africa after the diplomatic tour got delayed for a day. Melchizedek Cadiz gives us more.
Assalamu alaikum. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi's upcoming trip to Africa has been delayed until Wednesday morning to allow for finalization of key memoranda of understanding that are vital for strengthening relations with African nations. The rare visit will include a diplomatic trip to Kenya, Uganda, and Zimbabwe, which described by Iran as a continent of opportunities. The three-day trip marks the Islamic Republic's latest diplomatic effort to forge new alliances and ease international isolation. This will be the first time an Iranian president will visit Africa in 11 years. Raisi was supposed to hold a press conference with Kenyan President William Ruto on Tuesday morning before the trip got cancelled. The Ugandan official confirmed that Raisi's scheduled trip to the East African country will proceed as scheduled on Wednesday. Boosting economic and trade ties with the three African nations is high on the agenda. Iran has stepped up its diplomacy in recent months to reduce the impact of crippling sanctions reimposed by the United States in 2018. In March, Tehran agreed to restore ties with Riyadh in a deal brokered by China. This was followed by a trip to Latin America, which included a tour that included Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba in June before dropping off to Indonesia. The visit took place a week after Iran became an official and ninth member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, which includes Russia, China, and India. Barakallahu fikum jami'an. Kan hada Melchizedek Cadiz sa akhbar SMNI, Kuwait.
The United Arab Emirates prepares to welcome the Prime Minister of India this week. This report from Jonathan Acobo.
Marhaba! Indian Prime Minister Modi is scheduled to visit the UAE on Saturday. Modi is set to arrive in Abu Dhabi this weekend and holds talks with the UAE President, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Both leaders will find ways to further strengthen the India-UAE comprehensive strategic partnership. The meeting will also be an opportunity to explore partnerships in various domains, such as energy, education, healthcare, food security, financial technology, defense, and culture. As of 2023, the UAE has an estimated population of roughly 10.2 million. Of this number, about 2.8 million are Indians, who remain to be the largest group of expat population in the UAE. Modi will be on an official two-day visit to France from Thursday before traveling to the UAE this weekend. Tajublaqa Mazumin Tadati at Gharmidbay na Jonathan Kubos My News at the Emirates.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy met with NATO leaders on the day 2 of their annual summit for the NATO-Ukraine Council. Meanwhile, leaders of the G7 nations, this is the US, the UK, Germany, Japan, France, Canada, and Italy, announced a framework to protect Ukraine in an effort to protect the country against what they call as future Russian aggression, taking note that the assurances comes after Kiev missed out on a clear timetable for its NATO accession. This G7 framework can be joined by other nations, and it encompasses elements including modern advanced military equipment, training, cyber defense, and intelligence sharing. In return, Ukraine would pledge to improve governance measures and enhance transparency. In other news, President Vladimir Zelenskyy had a more conciliatory tone on the second day of the summit, and this is after he criticized NATO leaders for not providing his country with a clear timeline for a membership in the alliance, saying that it is unprecedented and absurd. Carlo de la Peña tells us more.
Zelenskyy has accused NATO of not showing enough respect for its unwillingness for the immediate membership for Ukraine. The Ukrainian president made the remarks as NATO kicked off its summit in Vilnius, Lithuania. Citing signals he had received which indicated that Ukraine would not be given an invitation of any sort to join NATO. In a statement on social media, Zelenskyy said, and quote, "We value our allies, we value our shared security, and we always appreciate an open conversation. Ukraine will be represented at the NATO summit in Vilnius because it is about respect, but Ukraine also deserves respect. It's unprecedented and absurd when a time frame is not set neither for the invitation nor for Ukraine's membership, while at the same time vague wording about conditions is added even for inviting Ukraine." End of quote. Zelenskyy also claimed that NATO's indecisiveness was a sign of the bloc's weakness. Reports citing the most recent version of NATO's draft communique states that it will be in a position to extend an invitation to Ukraine when allies agree and conditions are met. However, Zelenskyy hits out at NATO for its seemingly unreadiness to neither invite the country to the alliance nor to make it a member of it. According to the Ukrainian president, this means that a window of opportunity is being left to bargain Ukraine's membership in NATO in negotiations with Russia. The Ukrainian president's remarks did not go unnoticed by NATO, with a political report citing an unnamed senior diplomat from Central Europe saying that Zelenskyy was going too far and that such remarks is not a thoughtful and fair approach from him. U.S. Republican Senator Rand Paul also criticized Zelenskyy, saying that the Ukrainian president might need to recalibrate his complaints to avoid alienating his Western allies. Paul said, and quote, "We've given them $100 billion, and he has the audacity to be brazen as to tell us we'd better speed it up? I'd say that's audacious. I'd say that it's brazen, and that's not very grateful for the $100 billion that we've given him so far." End of quote. Meanwhile, NATO has reaffirmed its readiness to give Ukraine membership at some point in the future, but it will be allowed to bypass the bloc's Membership Action Plan, or MAP, which is usually required for candidate members. NATO's statement read, and quote, "We reaffirm the commitment we made at the 2008 summit in Bucharest that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. And today we recognize that Ukraine's path to full Euro-Atlantic integration has moved beyond the need for the Membership Action Plan." End of quote. NATO said Ukraine has become increasingly interoperable and politically integrated with the US-led bloc, but outlined Ukraine's need for more democratic and security sectoral reforms. It can be remembered that NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that NATO must first ensure that Ukraine achieves a victory in its fight with Russia. However, the NATO chief warned that if Ukraine did not succeed, then its membership in the alliance will be out of the question. Reporting, this has been Carlo de la Peña, SMNI News.
After months of resistance, Turkey has finally agreed to back Sweden's bid to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Hill Trinidad reports.
As the NATO summit kicked off in Lithuania this week, members of the alliance hailed the first day of the annual meeting as historic after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan agreed to forward Sweden's NATO bid to the Turkish parliament. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg hailed the move as historic, as last-minute negotiations saw Erdogan soften its stance and drop its opposition towards Sweden after a year of blocking the move. Stoltenberg said Turkey finally agreed to move forward following talks in Vilnius, Lithuania, with Erdogan and Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson on Tuesday.
Good evening. I have just had a constructive meeting with President Erdogan and Prime Minister Kristersson. I'm glad to announce that as a result, President Erdogan has agreed to forward the accession protocol for Sweden to the Grand National Assembly as soon as possible, and work closely with the Assembly to ensure ratification.
The NATO chief, however, did not specify when will Sweden become an official member of the alliance or when Erdogan would move the document forward to the Turkish parliament, which must then vote to approve it. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy, who also attended the summit, said the bloc has not yet provided any time frame nor a formal invitation for Ukraine to join the bloc. Meanwhile, the move is seen as a major win for Sweden's right-wing Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, who made Sweden's membership a key foreign policy priority since taking over as Swedish leader in October. Before the historic breakthrough, Erdogan urged the European Union to open a way for Ankara's accession to the bloc in exchange for considering Sweden's NATO bid. However, the European Commission was quick to reject the idea, stating that the EU and NATO are two different processes and are not related. Reporting from Sweden, this is Victor Trinidad, SMNI News.
Amid the summit in Lithuania, a Canadian lawyer criticized the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, over its expansion, saying that it is an aggressive military alliance rather than a defensive one. Andrea Santos reports.
Canadian lawyer Dimitri Lascaris said NATO is a source of instability across the world and said that the U.S. wants to perpetuate its global hegemony through the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Its real objective in Ukraine is to perpetuate the era of United States global hegemony, which began with the fall of the Soviet Union by the United States government and Western governments in order to weaken a geopolitical rival. And when this is finished, they could not care less about what happens to Ukraine.
Dimitri Lascaris, a journalist and activist, said that many Western countries are sending weapons to the Ukrainian frontliners, and this includes NATO member Canada. But Lascaris said that such move only prolongs the crisis and pointed out NATO's records in other countries like Libya and Afghanistan only proved its damage to world peace and the lives of the people.
The greatest threat, frankly, to Canadian democracy is to the south of our border, and it's called the United States government. Well, let's look at NATO's record in this part of the world. What did NATO do to Libya? They destroyed Libya. What did NATO do to Afghanistan after 20 years of warfare and probably several $1 trillion of expenditure? They left Afghanistan in smoking ruin. NATO is clearly a source of instability. It is an aggressive military alliance. It is not defensive.
Reporting, this is Andrea Santos, SMNI News.
Japanese citizens rallied in the streets of Tokyo to protest against their prime minister's attendance to the NATO leaders summit in Lithuania. Ken Hashimoto reports.
Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's attendance to the NATO's leaders summit in Lithuania marks the second consecutive year that a Japanese prime minister has attended such event, causing great dissatisfaction among Japanese citizens.
People were holding banners that read "No Wars" and "No to Revision of the Constitution," and chanted slogans to oppose the Japanese government's continuous alignment with NATO and significant increase in defense spending. They feared that these actions could lead Japan down a dangerous path towards militarization.
第二次世界大戦で日本が一体どういうことをしたのかということだというふうに思うんですよね。それは朝鮮半島に対する植民地支配であるし、あるいは中国に対する侵略戦争というふうなことを、5月の広島サミットから今回の岸田首相による NATO 会議出席に至るまでね、岸田の言うようなこの自国を守るためのそういった戦争では全くないということだというふうに思います。全世界の人々がこんな戦争には絶対反対なんだと言って自分の国で戦争反対の声を上げていく。
Earlier this year, NATO announced the decision to set up a liaison office in Tokyo in 2024 to boost bilateral ties. However, many protesters complained about the potential NATO office in Japan, calling it a preparation for war.
ところに、岸田首相が参加するっていうこと、それから東京に NATO の事務所を作るっていう話もありますけど、それは要するに戦争の加担するといいますか、参加していくっていうことであって、そういうことは断固として許せないと、そういうふうに考えて。
今 NATO という北大西洋条約機構という形で日本からは遠い国で起こっているはずの戦争に日本がわざわざ出かけていく。そして日本に NATO の事務所さえ作ったらどうかとまで言う。なぜそんなことを言うのかといえば、ウクライナ戦争をアジアに持ってきたい。それを許さない。嘘を見抜いて暴露して訴えて、多くの人々が心を一つにして手をつなぐことを今やろう。
今私たちが本当に非正規職とかで食べていけない状態で困ってるのにね、それを全然関係なしで軍事費だけ上げていく、これ自体がもう本当に戦争そのものだと思うしね、そういう危機感で私も集会に参加しているところなんです。
Meanwhile, prior to attending the NATO Leaders Summit, the Prime Minister of Japan held talks with his Polish counterpart, Mateusz Morawiecki, to further deepen their ties as well as to address ongoing issues. Kishida stopped by Warsaw to meet with Morawiecki to talk about security in the region, as Poland's neighboring country, Ukraine, has been fighting to repel Russia for almost 17 months. The two prime ministers also had discussions on strengthening their economic ties after stagnating in the pandemic. Poland, on the other hand, welcomed a recent large investment by Japanese air conditioning giant Daikin Industries. In addition, Kishida and Morawiecki also agreed to increase cooperation in areas of advanced technology, cybersecurity, liquid gas, and railways. Kishida has visited Poland back in March when he showed Japan's support to Poland's military and humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, while also announcing a special financial program to aid Poland's efforts.
Meanwhile, protesters said that the Japanese government is used by the U.S. as a pawn to increase defense spending while ignoring people's livelihood. 以上、日本から梨本健太でした。SMNI News Japan.
Prime Minister Hun Sen reiterated his appeal against using forbidden weapons of war by urging NATO member states to oppose America's plan to provide cluster bombs to Ukraine. Sandy Abuela reports.
As the two-day North Atlantic Treaty Organization kicked off in Lithuania, Cambodia Prime Minister Hun Sen urged NATO and U.S. allies to dissuade U.S. in its plan to send cluster munitions to Ukraine. Prime Minister Hun Sen opposed America's plan to send deadly cluster bombs to Ukraine in the fight against Russia. Following the announcement of U.S. transfer of $800 million worth of cluster munitions to Ukraine, Hun Sen urged member states to oppose this plan. In a tweet, he said, quote, "On behalf of the head of the royal government of Cambodia, I would like to continue to call on NATO member states and some U.S. allies, including the United Kingdom, Spain, Germany, and Canada, all of which are signatories to the Convention of the Prohibition of the Cluster Munitions, to take responsibility and participate in preventing U.S. President Joe Biden and the President of Ukraine not to use this deadly weapon. I know for sure that Cambodia is small and weak, but out of compassion for the people of Ukraine, I call on the President of the United States, the donors, and the President of Ukraine, the recipient, to refrain from using cluster munitions in this war, because the real victims are the Ukrainian people." End of quote. The Cambodian Prime Minister said that the pain of the country in the 1970s, in which U.S. dropped cluster bombs, is still felt after more than 50 years ago and completely not yet been eradicated. Meanwhile, Natalia Shinkina, the deputy head of mission and political counselor of the Embassy of Ukraine in Vietnam, said that the Ukraine understands the concerns of Prime Minister Hun Sen, but likely said that there are not so many options apart from using the cluster munitions. Shinkina said, and the need of these cluster bombs was seriously taken after weighing carefully and confirmed that the specified munition at this stage of repelling Russians meets the most urgent needs of Ukrainian forces. The U.S. will send cluster munitions to Ukraine as part of a new military aid package. President Joe Biden in an interview said that they've run out of ammo, that's why they have decided to provide such weapons. Meanwhile, the Cambodian Mine Action Center conducted a training on the use of lineman detection equipment for the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. The equipment used in the training was developed in Japan and is expected to improve through the use of radar that can determine the shapes of the mine even if it's still buried. This training was the result of the joint commitment between Prime Minister Hun Sen, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Cambodia, and Prime Minister Kishida Fumio of Japan in their bilateral meeting during the 2022 ASEAN summits and other related summits in Cambodia. Rika Prichinampen, Sandy Abuela, SMNI News, Cambodia.
Decades have passed and removing unexploded ordnance is still a problem in Laos after the United States dropped millions of it during the Vietnam War. Jane Torzar reports.
Laos continues to grapple with accidents related to unexploded ordnance or UXOs from the Vietnam War, although 5 decades have passed after the signing of the Paris Peace Accords that led to the full withdrawal of American troops in the country. Laos is the most heavily bombed country in the world per capita. Throughout 1964 to 1973, over 2 million tons of ordnance were dropped on Laos. Of this number, 30% failed to explode. Over 270 million cluster munitions were dropped from U.S. warplanes, leaving an estimated 80 million live bomblets scattered and buried around the Southeast Asian country. And around 25% of the national territory of Laos is still littered with unexploded ordnance, with Siem Quang province in the northeastern part of the country, on the border with Vietnam, being the hardest hit area. The government of Laos established UXO Laos in 1996 to investigate, detect, and destroy bombs left by American troops.
โดยเฉพาะช่วงระยะการกดกู้อยู่ภาคสนามซึ่งก็ได้เฮ็ดให้พนักงานพวกเขานี่เสียชีวิตและบาดเจ็บ
รู้สึกย้านแต่ย้านมีพี่น้องหรือว่าชาวบ้านนะเกิดอุบัติเหตุเนาะแห่งจูงใจก็คือว่าเขาได้เข้าอยากสมัครเข้ามาช่วยเหลือ
The program is expected to take another 100 years to complete due to the complex terrain of mountainous areas and limited manpower and financial support. According to the Lao Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, over 1.8 million UXO devices had been cleared from 79,599 hectares of land from 1996 to February of this year. It can be remembered that many countries and organizations across the globe opposed the United States' decision to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine amid the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Butlangan Common Invention Patyat Lao Common Laikan Jane Torzar SMNI News, Lao.
Meanwhile, Australia plans to send a surveillance aircraft to Germany to help monitor the flow of humanitarian and military supplies to Ukraine. Devi Suarez reports.
The E-7A Wedgetail, one of Australia's most sophisticated early warning and airborne platforms, will be stationed in Germany for 6 months.
As many as 100 crew and support personnel will accompany the aircraft for half a year. The deployment of the aircraft will ensure that the vital humanitarian and military supplies provided by the international community to Ukraine are protected. The E-7A Wedgetail provides Australia with one of the most advanced airspace battle management capabilities in the world, with the ability to coordinate a joint air, sea, and land battle in real time. The aircraft was modified to combine long-range surveillance radar, secondary radar, and tactical voice and data communication system to provide airborne early warning and control.
The surveillance aircraft will operate only in European airspace and avoid crossing into Ukrainian, Russian, or Belarusian skies. Reporting from New South Wales, this is Devi Suarez, SMNI News, Australia.
Germany will be sending troops to Australia to take part in joint drills together with thousands of military personnel from at least a dozen nations. Jillian Lebuet for the details.
Some 30,000 service members from 12 other nations, including Germany, will travel to Australia to participate in joint drills focusing on the Indo-Pacific amid rising tensions with China in the region. Up to 240 German soldiers will take part in the Talisman Sabre exercise in Australia. The joint drills will take place from July 22nd to August 4th. This is the first time German troops will participate in the exercise. Talisman Sabre is held every 2 years and is by far the largest drill between Australia and the US. For 2 weeks, the Germans will train in jungle warfare and landing operations alongside soldiers from Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, France, and Britain, among others. Germany's army chief said the Western European country now had to look beyond Europe to respond to modern-day security challenges. When asked if the deployment of German troops to Australia aims to send a message to China, the German army chief made it clear the move does not aim to antagonize anybody. Just like Australia, China is Germany's most important trading partner, while 40% of Europe's foreign trade flows through the South China Sea, a strategic waterway that is now at the heart of territorial disputes in the Indo-Pacific. Reporting from New South Wales, this has been Gillian Libuit, SMNI News, Australia.
The Treasury Chief of the United States warned that the country is still at risk of an economic downturn, saying that it is not off the table or cannot be ruled out yet. Hans Marshall reports.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned that the United States is not yet out of the possibility of an economic recession. Yellen, in an interview with an American broadcast network, said it's appropriate and normal for growth to be moderate. Just recently, according to a report, the economy only added 209,000 jobs in June, the weakest since December 2020. The unemployment rate slightly decreased from 3.7% in May to 3.6% in the same month. However, the added jobs were fewer than in previous months. Meanwhile, even though it began to ease, inflation was still high after prices rose 4% year over year in May. This is still double from the 2% target of the U.S. Federal Reserve. Taking this into account, Yellen pointed out that the inflation is too high and did not rule out a potential recession. In a statement, she said, "We have a healthy economy, a great labor market, inflation too high, and a concern of ours and the American people, but coming down over time." Last week, the central bank also warned that a recession this year is quite likely, but probably won't be deep or prolonged. Meanwhile, the Bank of America on Tuesday agreed to pay $250 million in fines, as well as compensation to settle claims that it systematically double-charged customers' fees. The bank also reportedly withheld promised credit card perks and open accounts without the authorization of customers. The said bank agreed to pay $100 million in restitution to harmed consumers. Another $150 million will be paid for civil penalties after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and so Office of the Comptroller of the Currency said Bank of America violated numerous laws starting in 2012. This is Hans Marshall reporting, SMNI News.
The Philippine government is working on a deal to export calamansi to China. Let's hear the details from MJ Mondihar.
The Philippine Embassy in China is currently engaged in efforts to export agricultural products to the region. In an exclusive interview with SMNI News, Philippine Ambassador to China Jaime Flor Cruz revealed that they are now working on potential calamansi exports. Calamansi is the most commonly grown backyard tree among citrus species due to its ability to thrive in various environmental conditions. Additionally, Flor Cruz mentioned that they're also working on sending coconut products to China.
Gusto po rin nating pumasok sa yung kalamansi, yung coconut natin, at iba pang mga produktong Pilipino. Kasi makakatulong po ito sa ating mga magsasaka at manggagawa.
Citing data from the Philippine Statistics Authority, calamansi production from January to March 2023 was estimated at 12.78 thousand metric tons. Calabarzon recorded the highest production with more than 2,000 metric tons, amounting for 18.8% for the total calamansi production for this quarter. Central Luzon followed with a 14.7% share and the Davao region with a 13.2% share. The Philippines has already successfully exported durian products to China and is now looking to expand its export offerings.
So agriculture po, tinutulak po natin na makapagbenta pa tayo ng mas maraming agricultural products dito. Marami na tayong bananas, pineapple dito. Nabuksan na po natin ang market dito para sa durian. So nakapasok na po tayo noong Abril. Nakita ko po yung pagdating ng mga durian galing sa Davao at iba pang lugar.
The Philippines aim to export at least 54,000 tons of premium fresh durian fruits to China this year, with exports commencing in April.
Kumaga ang embahada po ay matchmaker. So naghahanap po tayo ng mga proyekto na sang-ayon dun sa prioridad ng ating administrasyon.
For Government of Philippines, MJ Mondihar, SMNI News.
The Prime Minister of Thailand, who seized power through a military coup nearly 10 years ago, announced his retirement from politics. Anisa de Guzman has the news.
Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha said he will retire from politics, with his announcement putting to rest any speculation of re-election in the future. Prayut made the announcement just 2 days ahead of a much-anticipated vote for Thailand's new prime minister this Thursday. The former general will retire from politics 9 years after he seized power in the military coup in 2014. In May, the majority of Thais voted to give the Liberal Progressive Move Forward Party an unprecedented majority in the new lower house of representatives, with its leader Pita Limjaronrat anticipated to be the next prime minister. The PM hopeful, however, still requires the support of about 64 more votes from the 250-member Senates to be declared as the next prime minister. Prayut, on the other hand, landed 5th place behind opposition parties Move Forward and Phua Thai. In early 2020, protesters dominated by young activists launched a series of demonstrations across the country as they called for reforms of the Thai monarchy and demanded the resignation of the former general. Prayut will remain in a caretaker role until a new government is formed. Di siya Nanisa de Guzman, Rangan Chakuntep Mahanakon, SMNI News, Pratat Thai, Sawadika.
Thailand's election body recommended for the suspension of Thailand's front-runner for Prime Minister. Satmokon Pisamay Guzon has the details.
Thailand's top Prime Ministerial hopeful, Pita Limjaronrat, is at risk of getting suspended after an investigation launched by the Election Commission. The election body investigation centers around Pita's controversial shares in ITV, which has not been broadcasting in years and delisted from the Thai stock market in 2014. Under Thailand's election law, politicians are not allowed to hold media company shares, and if found guilty, Pita could be banned from politics while facing up to 10 years in prison. The PM frontrunner accused the Election Commission of abusing its power under the Criminal Code. Last month, Pita said he has allocated 42,000 of those shares inherited from his late father to other heirs, quash assumptions the media company will be revived and used for political means. Pita assured he was in good spirits despite facing the risk of being suspended as a lawmaker as the whole country awaits for the parliamentary vote on Thursday to decide for Thailand's next premier. Limjaronrat is still eligible to run for Prime Minister. In the event, he will suspend from his duties as a lawmaker, according to the report. รายงานจากราชบุรีนายชัดมงคลพิสมัยโกศล SMNI News ประเทศไทย สวัสดีครับ
Members of the Japanese Nuclear Energy Commission and opposition lawmakers in South Korea gathered together to look for alternative solutions on dumping the nuclear wastewater from the Fukushima power plant. Natsumi Kojima has the details.
Japanese Nuclear Energy Commission members and South Korean opposition lawmakers discussed alternative solutions to treating the nuclear contaminated water rather than releasing it into the sea at a meeting in Japan. Dumping the nuclear contaminated water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant is not a solution for the members of the Japanese Nuclear Energy Commission and South Korean opposition lawmakers. This is why they joined together to look for alternative solutions to the plant. Experts from the Citizens Commission on Nuclear Power agree that the impact of discharging nuclear contaminated water into the sea is long-lasting with complicated results, pointing out that it is irresponsible to release nuclear contaminated water into the ocean. South Korea's opposition lawmakers reiterated their opposition to the discharge plan as its safety cannot be guaranteed and worry that nuclear contaminated water will bring irreversible harm to the global marine environment. Japanese expert Kawai Yasuro also briefed the lawmakers on several more scientific ways to deal with the contaminated water.
溜まっている汚染水はモルタル固化して海洋には流さなくていいよと、そうすればですね、で地上で固形物のまま置いときなさいという提案を最善の案として出しました。汚染水を外に海洋に捨てなくても解決案はあるんだということを改めて韓国のミッションの方々、共に民主党の皆さんにご説明をしました。
Suginami Tamoto, another commission member, said that the discharge of radioactive substance into the sea is an international issue that involves major international responsibility and criticized Tokyo Electric Power Company or TEPCO for dumping wastewater into the Pacific Ocean.
やはり海に放射性物質を流すということは国際的な問題だと思います。国際的に極めてその責任の重い問題だと思います。薄めればいいということではありませんし、太平洋の海水は東京電力のものでもありませんから、それを自分たちの好きなだけ使っていいというような考え方自体ですね、極めて傲慢だと思います。でそれは海外の人、韓国でしたり太平洋諸国の人たちがこれを問題にするのは当然だと思います。
Experts, lawmakers, and concerned citizens are hoping that the Japanese government and TEPCO will listen to their voices and will scrap their plans to look for alternative and safe solutions. 以上、日本から小島のスミニュースお伝えしました。SMNI News, Japan.
Back here in the Philippines, former chairman of the MTRCB, Senator Grace Poe, commented on a controversial film that allegedly depicted China's claim to the disputed territory in the West Philippine Sea. MJ Mondihar reports.
Pero nung ni-review ko yung litrato, ito yun no? Parang drawing ng bata. Kung nakita ninyo yan.
That photo was taken from a scene in the Hollywood film Barbie. The film was banned in Vietnam due to its alleged depiction of the South China Sea, particularly China's claims to the 9-dash line. Now that the Philippines is one of the claimants in the disputed territory, should the film also be banned in the country? According to Senator Grace Poe, a former chairman of the MTRCB,
Hindi nga nakalagay yung pangalan ng Pilipinas dyan eh. Indonesia, Malaysia, or Vietnam, wala naman dito. Ni China, wala. Okay. Di ba fiction nga?
The photo held by Poe came from the MTRCB. According to the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board, they will not ban the film.
So ang mga dash lines dyan, pag binilang mo, hindi 9. Nasa 20. Dahil yan ay lakbay ni Barbie. Okay? Yung mga dash na yon.
Senator Francis Tolentino, Poe's colleague, urged the MTRCB to ban the film. He claimed that it promotes conflict among the claimant countries in the West Philippine Sea. However, the MTRCB stated that there's no basis for such action and instead assigned a PG-13 rating to the film, indicating that parental guidance is required for viewers aged 13 and below.
So siguro bago tayo magbigay ng statements, kailangan muna natin, kaya nga 'di ba, you have to review the material in its entirety.
Poe, who now chairs the Senate Committee on Public Services, understands the strong emotions of Filipinos regarding the territorial dispute. But
this is a geopolitical issue, so other producers be very mindful of that kasi nga meron nga tayong arbitral ruling in our favor.
The MTRCB has banned 2 films in the country regarding the 9-dash line issue. The latest film has been reviewed by the MTRCB in coordination with the Department of Foreign Affairs.
A Chinese official emphasized that Vietnam should not associate issues concerning the South China Sea in normal cultural exchanges, such as in films. For Ganamabul of Philippines, I'm Jay Mondihar, SMNI News.
And before we end, may you be inspired with the message of the appointed Son of God. Annex yourself willingly and voluntarily to the government of heaven on earth. That's all for today's edition of Newsline World. For more news update, you may visit SMNINewsChannel.com or follow us on our official social media accounts on Rumble, Facebook, and Twitter. For God and my beloved country, the Philippines, I'm Angel Pastor. Thank you for watching Newsline World, and thank you to our beloved Pastor, Pastor Apollo Sikibuloy, for the opportunity to be part of this program. May you continue to listen in SMNI as it delivers nothing but fair, truthful, and balanced news, because SMNI is your source of credible news.